College football season right around the corner. We are going to let College Football 25 predict how the season will play out. We will go over each conference and every team in those conferences to see how they finish. We will simulate 10 seasons and average each team's record to see how things play out. And at the end of the video, we will play out a 12-team college football playoff. We start with the American here, and it shouldn't be a surprise to see the Memphis Tigers on top, finishing 10-3 according to the simulations. Seth Hennigan and that passing attack were absolutely lethal. It's a good season for the Tigers. They are in the running to secure that college football playoff spot for the group of five, and they win the AAC. Behind them, North Texas gave them a fight, had some pretty good seasons, a couple of 12-win seasons, but also some struggling seasons as well. They finish 8-5. Rice and UAB are going to finish 8-4, which was kind of surprising to see them have successful years, but not completely out of the question. It would probably be a surprise more than anything, but still very possible. ECU comes in next at 7-5. They tie with Tulane, who also finishes 7-5. ECU is looking to bounce back after a tough season. Tulane is looking to continue their success under John Summerall. So that should be an interesting team to watch as well. Charlotte comes in next. This is a group that added quite a bit from the transfer portal. So finishing 6-6 shouldn't be too surprising, but it would definitely be, I think, the ceiling for this team. Tulsa comes in next, which is another surprising team to see at 6-6, a program that is looking to bounce back in year two of their new coaching staff. So this is a group that should be really fun to watch. I think that the passing attack could still be really fun despite some of the pieces they lost. UTSA finishing 6-6 would be a disappointment. We do have some turnover that Jeff Traylor and his staff must navigate. So that's definitely something that could present some challenges. Navy finishes 5-7. Not really a surprise there. The midshipmen are kind of trying to figure out what they can do in the AAC as well in college football with the rules changing and their triple option offense. Temple finishing 5-7 would be a pretty solid season for them. You'd like to see obviously a bowl game, but the Owls have struggled over the last couple of years. FAU finishing 5-7 would probably put Tom Herman on the hot seat here. I think that they're expecting to do much better than 5-7. Well, the biggest surprise of this conference, though, has to be USF finishing 5-7 in the simulations here. This is a program that struggled in every single season that I simulated. That was kind of surprising and very disappointing. And if the Bulls finish 5-7, kind of kills that momentum they had from last year. And then finally, we get to the Army Black Knights, a team that finishes 3-9 here. I expect them to do better in real life, but here the Black Knights definitely struggle to put points on the board and keep the opposing team off. The ACC plays out a little bit more realistic overall than the AAC. Miami finishes 10-3 and does finish first in the ACC. They finished as the ACC champs. North Carolina State comes in next at 10-3 as well. A very close battle between those two teams, and those two truly did stand apart in these 10 seasons that we simulated. Clemson comes in next at 8-4. I think that would send a panic through the Clemson fan base if they did finish 8-4. Dabo Swinney is looking to have a better season than we've seen over the past couple years, and you'd like to see them get back to the college football playoff. An 8-4 season probably does not get the job done. Virginia Tech also finishes 8-4. Not really surprised there. That would be a good season for the Hokies. This is a program that surprised people last year and are expecting to do the same in 2024. Syracuse with a surprise as they finish 8-4. That's a surprising finish for the Orange. Fran Brown takes over that program, but I think in this game they could be really fun to watch. I know that when I've played against or with Syracuse so far, Aranda Gadsden's really fun to play with, so that's someone who could have a major impact. SMU is the newcomer of the conference that people are most excited about. Finishing 7-5 feels disappointing, but when you consider the level that they're jumping up to, it shouldn't be that disappointing. Louisville is finishing 7-5 here. I think Louisville has an uphill battle for sure. Jeff Brom is one of the best offensive play callers in this game. So finishing 7-5 might feel a little disappointing, but also I think there's definitely some big wins in there that could be considered a positive thing for this team. North Carolina finishes 7-5. That's probably a disappointing year for the Tar Heels. Though again, they have a lot to figure out. There are certain pieces that need to stay healthy. So there are definitely concerns, but this is a program that expects to finish better than 7-5. Same with Florida State. They finished 7-5 here as well, tied with Louisville, SMU, and North Carolina. Mark Norvell's team loses a ton of talent, so that might have something to do with how much they struggled in the game. But they expect to do better than that. Boston College also finishes 7-5. Bill O'Brien takes over. That will be an interesting team to watch. It will be fun to see Thomas Castellanos take over that offense and really be as electric as we know he can be. So that's definitely a team that you want to keep your eyes on. A surprising finish here in college football 25. Cal is 6-6. This is going to be an interesting year for the Cal Golden Bears. A very talented team, maybe Justin Wilcox's best team in terms of talent that he's had in quite a while. So that's something to keep an eye on. I think that Jaden Ott is one of the most electric playmakers in college football. Keep an eye on him. He is definitely worth watching if you need some random person to watch in college football. Jaden Ott is definitely your guy. Wake Forest finishing 6-6, I think would be considered a success story when you look at what they lost in terms of the transfer portal. That would be a solid year for them. Georgia Tech has a very tough schedule, so finishing 6-6 might seem disappointing, but it would actually be a pretty solid year depending on who they beat. Pitt finishing 6-6 would be overachieving. Stanford finishing 6-6 as well would also be considered overachieving. There's a lot of bowl eligible teams in this conference. In fact, the only two that aren't going to finish bowl eligible, one is going to be Duke, going through a quarterback change, going through a coaching staff change. Manny Diaz has a lot of work to do. Finishing 5-7 would be disappointing, but also there's definitely some steps that need to be taken before they can get back to eligibility. And then Virginia finishing 4-8. I don't think that's surprising. Tony Elliott has plenty of work to do there. Going to the Big 12, this is a very competitive conference, and it's easy to see why. Utah comes away with the win in terms of the Big 12 championship. They finished 10-3. They beat UCF, a team that could be very fun to watch, a team that has definitely a strong possibility of making the Big 12 championship game, winning the Big 12. They finished 9-4 here. Kansas State is right behind them at 8-4. That's not going to be a surprise. Avery Johnson takes over that offense. Oklahoma State also finishes 8-4. That will probably be a disappointment to Cowboys fans. I think they expect much better competing for that conference championship. Texas Tech is going to be in the running as well. They finish 8-4. So it's a three-way tie for third place there. That's a really interesting year for Texas Tech coming up. So we'll see how that plays out. Colorado probably would be a team that everybody's got their eyes on. A 7-5 finish is very realistic and a step forward, a big step forward from what we saw last year. I know Colorado fans expect bigger things, but I think that there's still plenty of work that Deion Sanders needs to do. Kansas finishing 7-5 would probably be disappointing. I don't think that Kansas fans want to finish 7-5 after what we saw last year, but it really depends on the health of Jalen Daniels. Baylor finishing 7-5 would be a step forward to take some pressure off Dave Aranda. That would not be a surprise. They have plenty of talent. DeQuan Finn comes in to take over that offense. Jake Spavital, that combination should be really lethal to watch. Arizona finishing 6-6 might seem surprising, but this is a very volatile team coming into 2024. I think people expect them to compete for the conference championship, but this is also a team that is going through some coaching change. They have some players that need to be replaced, and that could lead to some inconsistencies on both sides of the ball. Iowa State finishing 6-6 would consider a disappointment for most people watching that program. I think they have plenty of returning talent coming back that can make them better, but finishing 6-6 is a possibility because of the depth of this conference. Cincinnati surprises us with a 6-6 finish. Scott Satterfield has a lot of work to do in real life, but finishing in simulations here, they do finish 6-6. That's also tied with West Virginia as well. I think that Neil Brown would be under a little bit more heat after last year if they finished 6-6. This year, 5-7 for BYU. That puts them in a little bit of frustration because they don't make a bowl game. They also tie with TCU at 5-7. That would be a disappointment for Sonny Dykes and that team. And then Houston as well finishes 5-7. Last place is going to be Arizona State at 4-8. Though I don't think that should be too much of a surprise for those who pay attention to that conference. Conference realignment has made things so interesting coming into 2024, and the Big Ten is no exception. Ohio State comes out on top, finishing 11-2. They get redemption by beating the Michigan Wolverines, who finished 10-3 in the Big Ten championship game. The top of this conference is going to be stacked, and the simulation agrees with what a lot of people expect. Ohio State and Michigan are at the top. Oregon comes in next at 10-2, a team that will compete for a conference championship. That game against Ohio State probably dictates if they will make it to the Big Ten championship, though there's still other variables that could play out. Penn State finishes 9-3, kind of a disappointing finish if you're a Penn State fan. Yes, 9-3 is a good year, but if you finish 9-3 and you're fourth in the conference, I think people are going to want more. But again, it's a little bit different now with college football playoff expanding, but 9-3 is still a pretty solid season. USC comes in next. Lincoln Riley and his squad finish 8-4 in the 10 years that we simulate here. Miller Moss has pretty solid stats from the games that I've seen. So he is someone that could have a big impact for this team. Maryland and Rutgers are up next. Maryland finishes 7-5. This is the first year that they feel a little bit rewarded for playing in the Big Ten and don't have to face that Big Ten East schedule. Rutgers is the same thing. They finished 7-5 as well. This is a big year for the Rutgers Charlotte Knights. They have a loaded roster. They could make a big run. 7-5 is definitely a realistic ending, but also they could do much better. Nebraska also finishes 7-5. What would still be considered a success after last year, but I think Nebraska fans want a little bit better than that. Washington finishes 6-6. That would be a success for Jedd Fisch. That would be a group that finishes ahead of schedule than what we expected coming into the year. Purdue finishes 6-6. Ryan Walters would be able to get some of that heat off of him if they do finish 6-6. Indiana and Curt Cignetti, the new coaching staff and a revamped roster, are able to finish 6-6 here. Wisconsin also finishes with the same record. Luke Fickell and that staff would probably feel like things could have gone better if they do finish 6-6. However, that schedule is very difficult to navigate. So a 6-6 finish could seem much better than it actually is. Iowa's the surprise here. They finished 5-7. That would be a disappointing finish for the Hawkeyes, especially with the schedule they have. They have a very favorable schedule that should allow them to finish better than that. Minnesota finishing 5-7 is a very realistic finish. However, Minnesota fans and that coaching staff expect 6+ wins for sure. Illinois finishes 5-7 as well. That's not really a surprise. They have some talent to replace, but I think they're expecting to take a step forward this year. UCLA finishing 5-7, first year under Deshaun Foster, wouldn't be out of the realm of possibilities. Northwestern finishing 4-8. It's going to be a tough conference. You're going to have to struggle to find wins, and 4 wins might be all Northwestern can muster. Michigan State's going through a little bit of a transition with Jonathan Smith. So there's definitely something that could be improved, but this isn't unrealistic for Michigan State to see themselves at the bottom of the conference, even with a new coaching staff. I expected Conference USA to be a little bit easier to predict, but Liberty definitely did not make things easy. They finished 9-4 here. Their average is a 9-4 finish. They do win Conference USA, but it's Jacksonville State that gives them the most trouble. The Jacksonville State Gamecocks finish 8-5. They pushed Liberty quite a bit in all 10 seasons, and that's what made things interesting. They also had some surprises in this conference. Specifically, FIU finishes 7-5. Western Kentucky is not so much a surprise at 7-5. But teams like Sam Houston taking a step forward, they finished 6-6 after losing a lot of tight games in 2023. They bounced back with a 6-6 year, a bowl eligible season in 2024. Middle Tennessee under Derek Mason also finishes with the same record. The Blue Raiders could be a very fun team to watch, a team that people are sleeping on. And with this conference, it's up to anybody outside of those top 2 teams to make a run there. Kennesaw State comes in and surprises us the most with a 5-7 finish, their first year as an FBS program. We will see if that truly does play out or if they need some time, but they do finish 5-7. Same record as Louisiana Tech, a program that has their coaching staff under the hot seat, under the spotlight. A 5-7 finish would most likely send them packing. UTEP finishing 3-9, not really surprising. New Mexico State, very disappointing to see them finish 3-9. However, when you lose a lot of your talent and your coaching staff to other opportunities, you kind of expect this to happen. New Mexico State isn't a program that you can see a lot of sustained success. So you need the right coaching staff in. And if they do have that, this is completely wrong. But this right now feels like it's a good ending for them. The Independents played out about what you expected. Notre Dame finishes 9-3, a team that will compete for a college football playoff appearance. Riley Leonard, if healthy, could make a run and make things really special for Marcus Freeman and his program. UMass finishes 6-6. That's a little bit of exceeding expectations. Don Brown has a lot of work to do, but that would be a really fun season for the Minutemen. And then UConn finishes 4-8. You could flip UMass and UConn, and I wouldn't be surprised either way. Both teams could surprise us, but both teams could also finish in that 4-8 record. The MAC sees some redemption as Toledo gets the revenge on Miami of Ohio and wins the MAC conference. They finish 9-4. Miami comes in second at 7-6. This was every single season that I simulated. The MAC was a bunch of teams with very similar records. You saw a lot of 6-6 teams. You saw a lot of 7-5, 5-7, 4-8. And as you can see, you get a lot of that. Buffalo comes in next at 6-6. Penn State surprises us with the same record. Only 4 eligible teams for bowls in this conference, though, as the next few teams. Bowling Green finishes 5-7. Akron finishes 5-7. Central Michigan finishes with the same record, as does Western Michigan. So those last two are probably disappointing. Bowling Green and Akron would be a little bit more on the surprising end in the positive way. The next few teams, Northern Illinois finishes 4-8. That wouldn't be a surprise. Eastern Michigan, unless they can exceed expectations under Chris Creighton, which is not out of the realm of possibilities, also finishes with the same record. Ball State is at 4-8 as well. And Ohio, with the amount of talent they lost, finishes last with that same record. Heading to the Mountain West, Boise State comes in at 9-4. They win the Mountain West Championship. They were pushed by plenty of teams, though, and there were plenty of surprises and disappointments, plenty of movement. Fresno State finishes 8-5, despite the fact that Jeff Tedford is no longer the head coach there. The game hasn't updated that to reflect that. So an 8-5 finish when Tedford was running the show wouldn't be surprising. UNLV comes in next. A 7-5 year would probably be disappointing for the Rebels. This is a program that was in the conference championship last year. They expect big things in 2024. Nevada is a team that everyone pretty much expects to be at the bottom of the conference. They come in next and surprise us with a 7-5 finish to tie UNLV. San Diego State under Sean Lewis is going to be more explosive offensively. They finish 6-6. New Mexico takes on the Bronco Mendenhall era, and a 6-6 finish for them wouldn't be surprising. Mendenhall is a good coach who knows how to get underdogs to play at a higher level, and the Lobos could be one of those teams. They have the talent to definitely do that. Wyoming, under a new coaching staff, struggles their way to 5-7. Hawaii is a disappointing finish here. Timmy Chang expects his program to take big strides in 2024. They tie with Wyoming for that same record. Utah State just lost their head coach to being fired, and Blake Anderson. They finished with the same record there. Gray Norvell and Colorado State being in this category as well would be very disappointing. Air Force is going through plenty of personnel changes, so a 4-8 finish isn't completely unlikely. I think that they are building a good culture over there, but 4-8 is definitely not out of the question. San Jose State finishing 3-9 under Ken Niumatalolo would be disappointing. But again, you have so many tough teams to play in some of these conferences, and the non-conference schedule could present some challenges as well. And then the Pac-2 kind of ties into the Mountain West. This is definitely going to be an interesting year for the Mountain West and these two teams. Oregon State finishes 6-6 for their season under a new coaching staff. Washington State comes in next at 5-7. I expect those realistically to be flipped, but in this game, in the 10 simulations, Washington State had more struggles. Next, we go to the conference that's just as loaded as anyone else, the SEC. Georgia comes out on top, finishing 11-2. Not really a surprise there. The Bulldogs didn't really have much trouble in any of the seasons that we simulated, and overall they finished with an 11-2 record. The surprise, though, is Texas A&M coming in next and competing with Georgia for the conference championship. They finished 9-4. Texas comes in next, 9-3 finish. We get to see them play Texas A&M once again this year, and in the simulation, it felt like the Aggies won a majority of those contests. Texas comes in next, though, at 9-3. That should give them a good shot at making the college football playoff. Next is where things get really interesting. These are teams that I expect to be at the top of the conference and competing for those spots, but also this is very likely with how deep this conference is. Oklahoma finishes 8-4, a very realistic possibility for the Sooners. Alabama comes in at 8-4 under Kalen DeBoer. Nick Saban is now gone. Will they continue that success? Can they sustain that level of play? Or is this going to be a little bit of step back while they figure things out? 8-4 is not out of the realm of possibilities, but Alabama fans probably would be upset with that. Kentucky finishes 8-4 as well. That would be a good season for the Wildcats. That's definitely a possibility. Brock Vandagriff and that offense have plenty of explosive weapons to make that happen. Ole Miss coming in with the same record as well. I think Lane Kiffin is a really good offensive coach, but you're again playing in the SEC. The fact that you can have an 8-4 record and finish seventh in your conference says a lot about the depth of this conference. South Carolina comes in next at 7-5. I don't know if that's enough for Shane Beamer to keep his job. I think that it should be, but I'm not the people making those decisions. Auburn has a bounce back here at 7-5 under Hugh Freeze. Florida finishing 7-5. I don't think has the ability to give Billy Napier Coach of the Year, but a 7-5 record with that daunting schedule would be a really big success for that program. LSU comes in tied with them as well. That would be more of a disappointment when you compare them to South Carolina, Auburn, and Florida. Arkansas is coming in next at 6-6. I don't know if that's enough to keep Sam Pittman's job. Tennessee disappoints with that same record, as does Missouri. Those are two teams that expect to be potential top 10 teams coming into the year. So that finish would be disappointing for those fan bases. And then probably the most realistic part of this, outside of Georgia being first, was Mississippi State at 5-7 and Vanderbilt at 4-8. Finally, the Sun Belt. This is definitely a conference that has plenty of talent, plenty of competition. And Texas State actually comes out on top. They have an explosive offense under GJ Kinney and definitely have the ability to make something like this happen. Louisiana pushed them quite a bit, had plenty of successful seasons, lots of double-digit win seasons as well. And the Raging Cajuns finished 9-4 and second in the Sun Belt. App State comes in next at 9-3, a team that was right there with those other schools. And these three really separated themselves as the seasons went on. As you progressed through these simulations, those three teams definitely took steps above the rest. Arkansas State has a very interesting team coming into 2024, and 6-6 would be a solid year. You make a bowl game. Old Dominion would exceed expectations at that same record, but I think that Ricky Ronnie has done a great job despite the amount of talent they lose to the transfer portal every single year. Old Dominion is kind of a sleeper team in the Sun Belt. Troy finishing with 6-6 as well would be a very good season for this program. They lost a lot of talent. They lost their coaching staff. There's a lot of things changing with that program. So that finish, that record would be very good for them in year one under the new regime. Southern Miss finishing 5-7 technically would, I believe, exceed expectations according to their win total, but it feels like that fan base would want more. Marshall might be looking for a new coach if they finish with that same record and just miss a bowl game. James Madison would feel disappointing. I believe their win total is 8 coming into the year. So a 5-7 finish would not be ideal by any means. There's Georgia Southern finishing with that same record. I think that the Eagles have higher expectations than that. Coastal Carolina, the same thing there, as they are tied with those other four schools as well. Georgia State might have trouble finding wins, and it's obvious that College Football 25 thinks that as they finish 4-8. South Alabama just lost their head coach. So this is a team going through a lot of transition. They lost a lot of talent as well. So that finish isn't surprising. ULM winning 4 games probably would surprise a lot of people. And that's when where things get really interesting, because that means that they've upset one or two teams in this conference. We head into the 12-team college football playoff, and we get Penn State versus Texas. This is the 8 versus 9 matchup. And as we head late into the fourth quarter, Texas is looking to tie things up, and Quinn Ewers finds his receiver to tie the game at 29. Penn State, with time winding down, throws it on the right side. Drew Aller finds his guy on the right side, who's inside the 20 to the 10. Penn State takes the lead late in this game, and that's ultimately going to be enough as the wide receiver salutes his fans for a 36-29 win. Next, we have the number 5 Michigan Wolverines going up against the number 12 Memphis Tigers. The rank on here obviously does not reflect the actual ranks for this playoff here, this hypothetical playoff. Michigan is trying to score points late in the game, but they fumble, and Memphis recovers for the win. Next, we have NC State heading to Kyle Field and Texas A&M. This should be a very fun matchup to watch. And NC State is actually going to win this game convincingly, even though Texas A&M scores late. And the final first round game features the Notre Dame Fighting Irish against the Oregon Ducks. This would be an absolute blast to watch in real life. And Oregon late in the fourth quarter finds themselves up big and adds a field goal. And even though Notre Dame tries to make a comeback, it's the Ducks that move on. Georgia got a bye in the first round, and they are going to face Penn State, who beat Texas in that first round game. Now they face the Georgia Bulldogs, the #1 seed. And wow, it's Penn State who gets a pick in the end zone as Georgia is trying to add some points to seal the win. What a statement win for Penn State, 41-17 to send them to the semifinals. We head to the Rose Bowl where the Utah Utes are awaiting the Memphis Tigers. Memphis surprised Michigan in Ann Arbor, and they are stomping Utah, and they get another interception late in the fourth quarter, and the Tigers are trying to run this back to add to their lead. It's 38-7, breaks a tackle, can't get caught by the other guy, breaks another tackle, and it's in the end zone for a 45-7 win. Does the gritty there, 45-7. Memphis absolutely takes it to Utah to move on in this game. Ohio State had a first round bye, and they are going to host the NC State Wolfpack, a team that surprised Texas A&M as we saw them in their first round game. And let's see if they can do it again. Unfortunately, they cannot. Ohio State takes it to NC State 45-17. One of the more electric quarterfinal games that we see here as Miami takes on Oregon. The Ducks won their first round game and they're up 31-17 late in the fourth quarter. Cam Ward throws an absolute laser to make it 31-24. And on the ensuing kickoff, Oregon recovers. However, on 3rd and 7, Miami gets a stop to force a punt, but they get the ball deep in their territory, and Cam Ward fumbles as Oregon picks it up to secure the win. A tough turnover, but the Ducks find a way to move on and keep Miami in check, and they move on to face a really tough team in Ohio State. Before that, though, we are going to get a rematch of the 2019 Cotton Bowl as Penn State faces Memphis. And it's the Tigers once again surprising us with another big lead as they're up 45-20. Penn State is trying to convert a fourth down, and Memphis is not having it. They get a tackle for loss, and this is an absolute blowout, 52-27. I mentioned this before. Ohio State is ready to face Oregon. This could be an absolute epic matchup between these two teams. We will see how this game plays out. Oregon is playing with a ton of momentum, but Ohio State is a juggernaut that is tough to beat. And Oregon finds themselves down 35-14. Dillon Gabriel's trying to throw it deep, but can't complete it. And it's the Buckeyes that hang on to win in the Cotton Bowl to advance with a 35-14 win. Ohio State making to the national championship is not a surprise at all. Ohio State is expected to be there. It is a surprise to see the Memphis Tigers in the national championship game, but it goes about how you expect. Ohio State kicks a field goal here, and it is good, and a roughing the kicker penalty adds insult to injury, and it's going to count 37-14. Ohio State is going to come away with a win. Not really a surprising result as in terms of who is going to win, but it is a surprise to see Memphis make that kind of a run. But again, that's what makes the 12-team playoff so good. That's what makes it so interesting. I'm curious what you guys think. Who is going to finish with what record? Who's your team? What are they going to do with their schedule? And who is going to win the national championship? Make sure you're commenting below. Make sure you're liking the video and subscribe to the channel as well.